There's only one way the decision to non-tender Mike Tauchman makes sense, and I'll tell you what it is on today's episode of Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm Todd Welter. Welcome to Locked On White Sox, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. I'm a lifelong Sox fan. I've been podcasting here for over a year and a half and covering the team well before then, and also have covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. Well, I'm going to get to why the White Sox need more than just good defense to win more single-run games next season after I discuss how non-tendering Cam Booser and Tim Elko provides two bad looks for the organization. But first, let's discuss the only way Mike Tauchman being non-tendered will not be in vain. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Well, I'm going to appreciate everything Mike Tauchman did this past season. He provided professional at-bats, probably may have been the best Band-Aid player the team has had in right field as this organization still continues to try to replace Jermaine Dye, who retired in 2009. I mean, I do think in terms of like professional hitter, Mike Tauchman was probably the best. I mean, I know Avisail Garcia did have an all-star season, although I think that was more in left field. But otherwise, Diane Viciedo, Nomar Mazara, Oscar Colas, a long list of busts who just could not take the reins from Miguel Ordonez, who then passed it on to Jermaine Dye. Those were two great players in the White Sox organization that were very good at right field and, great in right field for a long time. And then the White Sox have just been applying Band-Aid solution after Band-Aid solution after Band-Aid solution. But he did not reach sacred cow status. And that's why I get why the front office decided to move on from the veteran. I'm not the one that's as much as up in arms as Mike Tauchman not getting non-tendered as some are. The legs were starting to go as multiple hamstring injuries kept him out of the lineup for long stretches. And while he had a solid slugging percentage, he wasn't exactly hitting the ball over the fence. Plus, he's going to be 35 next season. Although, I'll admit, I'm a Tauchman truther. I loved Mike Tauchman. But us Tauchman truthers, for us to actually like the decision, it's got to be because that $3.4 million that he was projected to earn in arbitration gets reallocated into addressing the team's bullpen or the starting rotation, or goes towards paying a contract to get a legit upgrade in right field or in first base. I don't want them, the front office, I don't want GM Chris Getz hiding behind getting better through internal improvement as the reason to not reinvest the money that could have been used, at least dollar for dollar, $3.4 million, to bring back Mike Tauchman, who again was a solid player, even as a utility player. Because if they don't use that money, the organization is going to look cheap. Nothing new here, but still, even if Tauchman was nothing more next season as a utility infielder, he still would have provided valuable veteran leadership and professional bats while still being able to play a solid outfield. And for some teams, that is worth $3.4 million. Some large market teams and contenders, they don't even bat an eye. I mean, the Dodgers had bench players like Kiki Hernandez on a $6 million deal and Miguel Rojas on a $4 million deal this past season. Miguel Rojas may have hit one of the biggest home runs in Dodgers World Series history. And that's one way the Dodgers spending actually helps them contend, because not only do they pay for premium talents, but they also pay for depth. Now, obviously, the White Sox are in a much different state right now than the Dodgers. I mean, also financially, Chicago just doesn't have the television contract that the Dodgers have. I mean, that's one of the reasons why the Dodgers are outspending everyone. They were the last team to get a sweetheart, RSN deal. And the White Sox also don't draw nearly as much as the Dodgers. So the Dodgers obviously have more revenue to play with, even though both are in very large markets. And the White Sox are also in phase 2 of a monumental rebuild. And in phase 2 of a rebuild, it can't hurt to try to find another veteran right who can suit up more than 93 games. Or it still can't hurt to even say, you know what, we're going to try Brooks Baldwin and Everson Pereira in a platoon role. Let's see what these young guys can do. I get it. Doesn't mean I have to like it, but I want to see then that money used elsewhere. Because while Tauchman posted a solid 756 OPS and 115 WRC plus, those hamstrings probably were not going to hold up again. They couldn't even hold up through spring training. Remember, he started the year on the IL and then had to go back while trying to score the tying run in Cleveland, and his hammy popped. So I get why they're like, you know what, we need a guy who plays more than 93 games. And while he had a 400 slug, very solid, he hit just 9 home runs. So ideally, you want, when you got a 400 slug or a 450 slug, you want the ball to go over the fence a little bit more. And the thing, though, that kind of did baffle me why they maybe didn't try to work out a contract, maybe said, you know, I want $3 million. If that's what I'm going to get, I'm going to get $3 million. I'm not going to settle for like $1 or $2 million. It still was kind of interesting that they didn't bring him back because he did represent good swing decisions that the White Sox want. But he just wasn't available. And he was turning 35, and that only increases the risk of him not being available. So what I really want to see, and this is the only reason to me it makes sense to not bring him back, is I want to see that $3.4 million, then the savings that they're pocketing, reallocated, not just stashed, not just used. And they should, and I keep saying that, and I've been saying that this offseason, that even if they go with a light payroll still under 100 million, let's say they replicate the payroll they had last year, there is some money to spend then in the budget. Because right now, per spot rack, the White Sox have just 56.63 million committed in payroll, with veterans Luis Robert Jr., Andrew Benintendi, and Derek Hill taking up 38 million of that. And even then, Derek Hill is barely taking up a fraction of that 38 million. Most of that money is Luis Robert Jr. and Andrew Benintendi. And again, for those screaming about, well, why are you giving $20 million to Luis Robert Jr.? I'm with you in that camp, but I see the logic over keeping, him over Tauchman, in that Luis Robert Jr. has at least played, a few more games, and he does play at least a little bit more of an elite defense, and he can still do a lot more. Plus, he's still 27. Tauchman is going to be 35. But if the payroll is even at 77 million, like the club finished the 2025 season at, or hopefully around 90 million that like SoxMachine.com has been running in for their offseason project, GM Chris Getz has money to spend to address the starting rotation that needs at least 2 veteran arms, in my opinion. Because I'm not comfortable running it back with Jonathan Cannon in the rotation again and Duncan Davitt. Along with, they do need at least 4, maybe even 5 more bullpen arms. Because right now, I think the only 3 arms that you can definitely feel comfortable with is Grant Taylor, Mike Vassell, and Jordan Leisure. And why they might even need, because you might say, well, they just acquired Chris Murphy from the Red Sox. Well, he might not be in play if they do decide to stretch him out and have him compete for a rotation spot. And also, I don't know how you view Brandon Eisert as a lefty long reliever. Do you view him as that or not? I mean, I sort of do, but I could see getting an upgrade. So with Tauchman gone, that's the other thing. They need at least one more lefty power bat, at least that can have slug, because Brooks Baldwin doesn't strike me right now as a power hitting right fielder. He's more of a bat to ball skills guy. That's what he's always been. And the reason why I bring up Brooks Baldwin, it seems clear right now on paper, that's probably who the starting right fielder is, or at least a platoon with Derek Hill, which I'll address his surprise re-signing in the 3rd segment. And, this money can be used, though, whether it's to combine to make a better offer as part of a $10 million offer, say, but I just want to make sure it's used like for, say, what I've been advocating for, an upgrade at first base, or at third if you want to move Miguel Vargas over to play first base. And while I believe Lenny and Sosa are on the right to return next season, I still don't trust his defense. And that's why I want to see this, cost-saving move actually be a cost reallocation. Maybe you use that to pay even bargain bin free agents like Ryan O'Hearn or Rice Hoskins, or use that money toward winning the Kazuma Okamoto sweepstakes. Go sign Devin Williams on a bounce back deal. Grab Jacob Junis like you should have done in the offseason. Sign Zach Little and Cody Ponce returning from overseas to the starting rotation. Just use the darn money. Well, Cam Booser and Tim Elko were one of the other players who were non-tendered on Friday, and I'm going to go over the 2 reasons why it looks bad for the organization after the break. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. And I'm always telling you about how fun it is to play FanDuel's traditional money lines, the over-unders, and the spreads. But if you want to win some big-time money or at least double or triple your cash, play FanDuel's props, parlays, or futures. So you think the Bulls can ride this good start to an unexpected 50-plus win season? Well, that's at plus 490 the last time I checked. So you could turn that possibly as little as, like, say, putting $10 on it into $49 if that happens. And say you're more realistic and you think the Bulls will do what they normally do, and that is have over 40 wins and make the play-in game. Well, you can combine that into a parlay to increase the potential of a better payout if that happens. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen of the day. And thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, you get the audio version of the show on places such as Apple or Spotify. So make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your audio podcasts. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me and maybe some hope. Also, make sure to check out my written content at SouthsideSox.com and on TapSportsNet.com. So Cam Booser getting non-tendered is a bad look, believe it or not, because it's another piece of evidence that Chris Getz hasn't been the greatest when it comes to pulling off trades that don't involve Garrett Crochet and, to an extent, maybe Eric Fetty. And even then, he got a little bit of luck there. The Dylan Cease trade, not looking good right now. But I'll never diss Chris Getz for the Garrett Crochet trade deal. That was a great trade. But the Cam Booser trade, trading for Dominic Fletcher, some of these other deals that he's made just keep looking bad. Like trading a young pitching prospect with upside for a guy who, while having a Hollywood-like story for how he got to the big leagues, he was not suited to be a high-leverage lefty reliever. And that shows, once again, Getz at his front office brain trust. They haven't been very good at pulling off deals that basically you need to get correct to round out your ball club. Those minor deals actually can go a long way. They can be huge for rounding out your roster, for finding, again, a high leverage reliever. And then, you get another bad look, that first baseman, Tim Elko. He getting non-tender just shows just how ugly the business side of baseball can be, considering the guy's going to miss significant time after needing surgery to repair a torn ACL. And if he does turn out to be a competent power bat off the bench for some other team, then you got to question, did they give up on him too soon? Hey, Gavin Sheets found some success elsewhere. Tim Elko's just the next candidate of possibly being a guy who actually finds the best version of himself with another organization. It's a possibility. And that's one of the reasons why I think that these, non-tendering Booser and Elko, while I definitely agree with non-tendering Booser, I've talked about it, that you could find, another roster spot, which they did. I didn't foresee them non-tendering Elko, and obviously it shows that they value a clean roster spot rather than having a flexible roster spot, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. But for Cam Booser, the only reason why I'm hammering on the organization is it's a huge miscalculation in trying to identify, basically a hidden talent. 32-year-old lefty that, yes, he was out of baseball and he goes works construction and he actually builds up his arm and he tries baseball again after flaming out originally. And he gets to the big leagues in Boston. And he does relatively well, actually, but in low and mid-leverage situations. The White Sox traded him because they had to basically go shop in the figurative scrap heap of the free agent and trade market because, again, of ownership slashing payroll. And they made a huge miscalculation in thinking he could be a high leverage reliever. Because remember, technically at one point early in the season, he was technically the team's closer. And those numbers were poor, especially in high leverage situations. Think about this. Opponents had a .423 average against him in high leverage. and hit .333 with runners in scoring position. He had a 10.45 FIP in high leverage situations. And I remember when I did a show around this time when he was acquired in December last year. I believe it was the Boston Sports Nation or SB Nation site that pointed it out in their season's review that, he was not good in high leverage situations. And Boston did not really think to use him in high leverage situations. That's why he was more of their low, medium leverage guy. Yeah, he could throw like 95, 96. But the White Sox, I think, really overestimated, what he could do. And for him to have any success, he probably should have been used as a low leverage lefty. But again, with the limited financial resources that the White Sox had, they had to try him out in a spot that he probably was not qualified to do. On a contender. I bet you if he was still on Boston, he'd be a low leverage lefty. And the White Sox traded an 18-year-old pitching prospect, Yoaker Fajardo, probably butchered his name. And it's, I've said it before, but it was a bad process trade. And I don't think I've really reinforced the point if you're saying, well, here he goes on the point again. Because organizationally, I think the club would have been better off keeping Fajardo since he had a 2.98 ERA and 13 starts for the Red Sox low A affiliate. He had 59 strikeouts in 51 1/3 innings at low A. Just poor process. And if you're going to give up a scratch-off prospect, which there's nothing wrong with giving up a scratch-off prospect even in that situation. But why it's poor process is you gave up a scratch-off pitcher, and those guys actually have the potential to be big league contributors. In this situation, you probably should have given up a hitter because there's a greater bust potential there. And the White Sox got terrible production from Booser, and now they got nothing to show for it. Now, I'll admit I was once an Elko truther, but I kind of reversed my stance when I kind of saw, okay, I think I see what the organization is seeing here. Because his lack of contact, even in a small sample size, and some of my former, ex-Elko truthers love to point this out in the comments, and I agree it's fair. It was a small sample size of 72 plate appearances, but man, it was a eye-popping sample size of him not being able to make contact. And I think that's what the front office really feared, was he was going to strike out just way, way, way too much for him to even be a potential power bat. It was just not enough contact to crush, to outweigh that he's going to crush the home runs at the big league level like he did in the minors. And I do remember doing a ton of shows going over how the front office was basically quietly telling us what they thought of him by not promoting him when he was still raking at AAA and taking forever to promote him and then demoting him very quickly. But I did not see them basically cutting him to get him off the 40-man roster, especially after needing surgery to repair a torn ACL. And again, it just feels like, the organization in this instance is valuing having a clean roster spot rather than a flexible roster spot, because they could have thrown him on the 60-day IL once spring training starts. But it's a cruel business sometimes. But at some point, the organization was clearly not high on the older prospect with how long it took again to promote him. And then actually, going out and acquiring Curtis Mead in the Adrian Hauser trade. And if they sign a veteran first baseman, then he falls further down the organizational ladder. But for those that are saying it's a small sample size, in that small sample size, he had a 41.7% strikeout percentage. The 4 home runs, especially his first one coming in the second big league game, along with the walk-off single against Detroit, obviously great memories. But the problem was, after he had a multi-hit game against Kansas City on June 7th, the rest of his at-bats, he went 0 for 24 with 16 strikeouts. And you want to know how many times he put the ball just in play to even get out? 5 times. And only one of them was hit hard. And since he was an older prospect, drafted in the 10th round in 2022, he was not going to be given a long runway. And while I think it's unfair that they basically cut him while he's recovering from an injury, kind of shows that, hey, they probably do want a clean roster spot. And I do hope, he recovers and he latches on with another organization to continue his baseball dreams. Well, the most surprising roster move was the decision to keep Derek Hill. And I want to talk about how maybe they're thinking about his defense could help the team win late single run games after the break. The NFL season is in full swing, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans, cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets, that can be a hassle. Between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout, it's frustrating. And that's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. Game Time is fast, easy, and backed by the Game Time guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price, plus all fees are included, so the price you see is the price you pay. I pulled up Game Time, and in just a couple taps, I saw amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite NFL games for as low as $100. I also recently used Game Time to get a great deal on 10 tickets for when Milwaukee took on Los Angeles and Luka Doncic. My brother-in-law, nephew, niece, and their side of the family and I all got a great deal through the app to sit together and watch Giannis and Luka battle it out. Wasn't a headache to find 10 seats so close together, and we had an amazing view of the game. Honestly, it's faster, cheaper, and less stressful than any other way I've bought tickets. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go! Download Game Time today. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox, wherever they get their podcast, as the show's available on all major podcast platforms. And everydayers, it's going to be rolling out soon. I got to get more details on it, but there is going to be such a thing called as the Everydayer Club coming out. So I will be giving some more information on that as it gets close to rolling out. I think it's going to roll out next week. So I'll have way more information for you, but there's going to be some cool things like a Discord chat that you can interact with me on, interact with other fellow White Sox fans on, some just other really cool things that are going to be coming up. I know some details are being finalized, but more information will be coming out. So just kind of wanted to give you a little hint there. Hope you had a good weekend. Again, mine was actually relatively low key. Did some work around the house. Had to definitely rake leaves, as I have this tree that just will hold on to the last possible moment of fall. But thankfully, obviously it wasn't freezing out there. I actually have to go blow some more leaves, as that last little part is just still clinging to life. My neighbors, I don't know if you got that too, or like you get your neighbors that are like, they've got their trees where their leaves just fall like in September while it's still like 60 degrees. Then you got the tree that's like, those leaves are like, I'm going to hold on for dear life. And then they fall like when it's like, November and it's getting colder, and like you got to go out when it's like 10 degrees outside, that type of stuff. So otherwise, hope you had a good weekend. The Bears won. That's why I'm rocking my Bears stuff today anyways. Well, Derek Hill coming back on 900K sort of surprised me in that he felt like just a roster filler. I mean, a veteran they brought in to cover the final 4 games of the season when you had Mike Tauchman, Andrew Benintendi, and Luis Robert Jr. all hurt to end the year. Just kind of felt like that. And one of the other reasons, he's going to be 30 next, season. He's not panned out for 5 other organizations. He's got a career 277 on base percentage, a career 30.6 strikeout percentage to just a 4.3 walk percentage. He's not exactly a guy who fits the team's profile of wanting better pitch selections at the plate, that type of stuff. So remember, that's a strategy under Ryan Fuller. Better pitch selection, good eye, and then try to launch the ball. However, CHSN's White Sox pre- and post-game host Chuck Garfien, he may have uncovered the underlying reason why they may have brought back Derek Hill, besides the fact that he only signed for $900,000, and that is his glove. And Garfien tweeted this out. This is at Chuck Garfien. I've got the tweet up for those watching on YouTube. Looking at the White Sox trades, they made defense a priority. Derek Hill had a +8 DRS in only 44 games last year in center field. Tanner Murray had played 6 positions and was the Rays Defensive Player of the Year in 2024. Everson Pereira is a plus defender, plays all 3 outfield spots. As a team, the White Sox ranked last in the majors in defensive run saves in 2024, -87. Last season, they improved to 24th, -32. They went 15-36 in 1-run games. Better defense in one way is one way to win more close games. Now, I have seen folks on the White Sox social media world then bash Chuck for basically, I would say polishing the turd. I mean, really spinning it. But I'm not going to actually bash Chuck's point because it's a fair point. Also, I mean, I've had Chuck on the show. He's a good dude behind the scenes. He's really passionate about the White Sox. I think he's one of the best pre and post game show hosts in the business. I mean, him and Ozzie Guillen are great together. Their chemistry is fantastic. And I do love the White Sox Talk podcast, especially when Ryan McGuffey and him were on it together. They just had amazing chemistry, especially how, Chuck has been more the positive guy. And then you had Guff as more of the realistic negative guy. And it worked together so well. And I do think by nature, Chuck's an optimist. So I'm not going to say, oh, there's Chuck towing the company line. But where I will deviate from him and where I will disagree with this take, though, is run prevention late in the game to me actually was never really the problem this past season. There was not so many late in the game situations where it's like, oh, the White Sox, just White Sox moments. Kind of like what happened a lot in 2024 where the defense was terrible. Outside of the ball bouncing off of Chase Meidraw's head in Kansas City, I can't really think where it was like, yep, the defense really, really screwed that up. It was more just, again, balls, again, like Grant Taylor, for example, where just guy was able to get the ball out on one of his 100-mile-an-hour fastballs and just plop it where they ain't. So maybe defensive positioning, but it wasn't, hey, we got to go get more, defense to win these single-run games. I mean, to me, if the White Sox want to win these closer games, it's about getting the young core to get that internal improvement, along with just hitting better with runners in scoring position to, stack on runs so you're not in as many single-run games, and an upgraded bullpen and an upgraded supporting veteran cast around the young core. But get a bullpen that can especially execute in high leverage. Because think about this, the White Sox had the most blown leads in the league with 50. Now, not all of those you can pin on the bullpen. So, some of that's the starters earlier in the game. But the bullpen did have 24 blown saves, and 6 leads were lost in the 9th inning. And the bullpen's 10.52 ERA in high leverage situations ranked 26th in the league. The lineup was dead last in batting average in high leverage situations with a 201 mark and a 62 WRC plus. And the batting order had a 234, not 320, that would have been great. The batting order had a 234 average with runners in scoring position. That was good for a tie for 27th in the league with Baltimore. So while preventing runs, especially late in the game, is necessary, so is executing pitches in those situations. And, beforehand, just tack on more runs. Cash in on your run opportunities. And getting back to the bullpen, get strikeouts like other teams try to do in tight situations. You don't have to worry about the defense then. If they're just striking out, if the ball's not in play, you don't have to worry about the defense. So go get bullpen pitchers who can throw heat and miss bats. Now, if the front office does want to improve the defense overall, here's the other thing that I hope they do then. Then find guys who can hit too. They do exist. I mean, I like Derek Hill's the theory then, yeah, 8 defensive run saves, that's great. But he can't hit. And think about it. The Mets just got Marcus Semien in exchange for Brandon Nimmo to improve their infield defense. He can also hit home runs and do other things. So go get those guys. Because when I see just, hey, we're going to upgrade the run prevention, I just get scared because run prevention upgrades were attempted in 2024. And when you also just say, we're going to upgrade run prevention, that usually means you're on a shoestring budget and you're signing the weak hitters of the run prevention pool. And I'd rather, try the route of get guys that can do both. Now, they're a little bit more expensive, but even bargain bin guys, try to find them, And if it's just, hey, Hill is just the late inning defensive replacement to replace Michael A. Taylor because he did retire, fine. Because I thought Michael A. Taylor's defense, outside of basically one business decision he made in New York, was solid, And the team also had some solid late inning players like Taylor or Austin Slater. And even briefly, like Vinny Capra. I had no problem with Vinny Capra coming in the 9th inning. I had a problem with Vinny Capra getting starts. But the issue was the defense just needs to improve its overall output. And Lenine Sosa and Andrew Benintendi is a big problem. But I don't remember the late game defense being like, oh my gosh, because they were able to sub in Mike Tauchman. I mean, not Mike Tauchman, Michael A. Taylor, for example. They did have some late inning defensive replacements. So if he's a late inning defensive replacement, fine. But if he's this, hey, we're going to really focus on run prevention and he's the solution, it just frustrates me that the White Sox keep just getting guys that can have a glove. Then why not try to get the guy that can do everything, hit and play defense? Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen of the day. Excuse me. For your second listen, check out Locked On MLB Game Night. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or listen to your podcast. I'll be back tomorrow with your mailbag questions and comments, so make sure to get those in to lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com or leave them on X, formerly Twitter, at Locked On Sox or at Todd J. Dub. You can also leave comments about today's episode on the episode page on YouTube. Again, email me, lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com, X, formerly Twitter, at Locked On Sox or at Todd J. Dub. Have a great day, and I will talk to you tomorrow.